Hello and welcome, Full Body Fixers. So welcome to the Full Body Fix Coaching Show. I'm, of course, your host, Robbie Stahl. I want to welcome our VIP family. First of all, much love for all of you guys. It's so great to have you here with us. And our Full Body Fix audience members, it's great to have you with us here today as well. And I'm wearing this shirt, Genius Network. It's actually a organization that was developed by a gentleman by the name of Joe Polish, which is a real guru, entrepreneur, and marketer. And both my guest expert and I belong to this group, Genius Network. But today, I thought it was very fitting to wear this because you are all going to be part of our Genius Network today. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about brain function, optimizing your brain function. Now, as a VIP, which if you don't know what a VIP is and you're part of our Full Body Fix audience members, that is what we call our clients here at the Fitness Doctor, and they become part of what we call our VIP family. So, and in this system, we talk a lot about biomechanical optimization, which is really the root to having optimal fitness. Because once you get near the age of 50, if your body mechanics, if you got shoulder issues, back issues, knee issues, foot issue, whatever kind of mechanical issues in your body, you usually got to get through those first before you can get those fitness type of results. So we approach it with that therapeutic aspect. But a huge part of that is optimizing your brain function as well, which our VIPs also do, right? They go through a process called neuromuscular retraining, developing their neurological connections with their body, optimizing the way they think about their body alignment, function, motor control, fitness aspects, and they have an entire upregulation of health. But today we're going to go many layers deeper into the optimizing of the brain function. And I have an amazing guest expert here with me today. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a moment. But there's three big things I'm going to tell you right out of the gate so you know what we're going to be getting into today, because I want to make this episode just jam-packed full of what we call knowledge bombs, right? So things that will really help you think about your health, your daily life, connections that you have with other human beings, and help you optimize and improve quality of life so that after this show, things actually improve and change. We're going to give you some action items and ways to think about that. So here's the big three areas for optimizing your brain function. The first one is inflammation. I'm sure you've heard a lot about this. Inflammation can actually be a good thing. Inflammation is also the root to regenerating our body, but when it gets in excess, not good. So we're going to get pretty deep into that, and especially how it affects brain function. We're also going to be talking about new challenges, right? Like what I just mentioned before, which is the neuromuscular retraining system that our VIPs go through, and other things you can do to optimize your actual brain function so that you can be physically fit and mentally fit well into and even beyond the age of 100. And then lastly, and really last but absolutely not least, because there's been a lot of research on this, do you know what one of the number one things is from psychologists that really study this area? The number one thing to actually prevent cognitive decline and dementia is actually social connections, having really strong bonded social connections. In other words, a reason, connection, and purpose for living, right? So those are the three big areas. So with knowing that, we're going to get into some amazing knowledge here on those three areas. And my special guest expert today is functional medicine and chiropractor, Dr. Thaddeus Gala. Dr. Thaddeus Gala is he's actually a friend of mine, number one, and he is one amazing individual. The level of things he's been able to accomplish already in his fairly young life already is just absolutely amazing. He runs a health clinic with about 50,000 patients, and he has all these different health practitioners in his clinics that they really help prevent cognitive decline, optimize health, remove diabetes, the type 2 diabetes, help people get through things that typically others think, well, it's actually not possible to fix like that. And his health clinics do all of those things. He's also written a book called The Secret to Defy Disease and Decay, right? With how fitting is that for our subject today? And he also wrote a cookbook, To Defy Disease and Decay. So, and one thing that's really cool is he's actually working on research on this exact subject that we're going to talk about today with none other than Albert Einstein, genius, right? Again, the shirt is so fitting for today's episode. Albert Einstein's great nephew. He's actually doing research with Albert Einstein's great nephew, and I can't wait to hear what Dr. Thaddeus Gala is going to share with us. And now, please help me welcome Dr. Thaddeus Gala to the Full Body Fix. Welcome, my friend.
Thanks, man. This is great. I'm excited. I know we've been talking about this for quite a while now. I'm glad our calendars lined up and we can make this happen. So yeah, thank you for that warm introduction, and thanks for setting this up. So let's dive in and see how we can help people make the rest of their years the best of their years, and maximizing their health, and and getting ahead of whatever it is that they're fighting or tackling right now along that. So how do you want to dive in, and how do you want to do this?
I guess let's go in order of those three subjects. I guess let's dive into inflammation first, if you would. Let's go like a big picture first. What is
Perfect.
inflammation? What is inflammation? Why does it matter? And what are the things we need to look out for that's going to affect our brain health and ultimately lead to our early decline upstairs, or can really make it work for us to really get optimal health?
Awesome. Sounds good. And on that, I've probably given over 200 plus lectures in my career. I've hosted 2-day, multi-day health longevity summits. So I have a lot of information. So the reason I share that is I really like conversations. So as we're talking, if you guys have a question, feel free to jump in and interrupt me, and or put it in the chat thread. So because I want to make sure that you guys get the most out of this, and that you leave here thinking, wow, that was an excellent use of my time. I'm really glad I came there. I got my questions answered, etc. So feel free to jump in anytime. And I would just say that based on the information that Robbie and Patricia were sending out, what can you just maybe, for those of you that are able to hear me okay, and if you have access to your keyboard, you're not driving or something, if you can just type in the chat, what would be the number one thing that you would want to learn, or maybe phrase it another way, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about your health or your brain health or your overall health function, what one thing would you want to get rid of, or what one thing would you want to change? And I'll try to make sure I either weave that in if we don't cover it already, or we can try to get that in the Q&A. So like Robbie said, one thing I think that's critical to understand is that I've always been an outside the box thinker, in that my journey first started when I was around 10 years old, when all the doctors said nothing could be done for my mom. The doctors said she'd be in a wheelchair the rest of her life. They said, we're sorry, we don't know what's wrong, but whatever she has is progressive. She'll be spending the rest of her life in a wheelchair. And since then, I've been on a path to help people naturally reverse and prevent chronic disease, so that they could have the energy that they wanted, the cognition that they wanted, so they could do what they want, when they want, with who they want, with very little, if any, limitations on their health. And ideally doing that as medication free as possible. Fast forward, now I have 4 functional medicine clinics. I oversee about 50,000 patient visits a year, and we treat everything from reversing Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, heart disease, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, neuropathy, and other neurodegenerative diseases. And one of the ways that we do that, oh, great, I see some comments coming in here. Laura, you lost your mom to Alzheimer's. I'm so sorry to hear that. Mostly interested in preventing it for yourself. Awesome. Yeah, my grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's. My aunt just died from Alzheimer's about 12 months now. And my uncle died with pretty severe dementia. So I know that neurodegenerative issues are a thing in my family as well. So I'm right there with you. Suntia, if I'm saying that right, protect your brain function as you age. Awesome. Christine, to keep sharpness and remembering, alertness. Wonderful. Darren, what are the signs to look for to prevent reverse inflammation? Andrea, inflammation. Cindy, brain fog. Awesome. So with the focus on brain, and like Robbie said, with inflammation, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that I don't like dogmas. And so I'm always open to new things. And I try to avoid absolutes as best I can. So if you hear me saying absolutes, feel free to call me on it. Or if I do say an absolute, because I'm in healthcare, I try to say, if I do use an absolute, it's likely because it's what I believe to be pretty much proven or pretty much well assumed at this stage. And but there's been things in my career that I've changed my mind on pretty significantly. And so when it comes to inflammation, the thing is that it's pretty widely recognized and pretty well understood that subclinical inflammation is the primary driver in chronic disease, and cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases. And there's two types of inflammation. The first type of inflammation is, you're working with Robbie and you do too much too soon, or you don't follow his advice and you hurt your shoulder or you hurt yourself doing something silly and it swells up and you have inflammation. And that's acute inflammation, or what we call acute or clinical inflammation. It's real obvious, it's red, it's swollen, it has all the cardinal signs. The one that we're talking about today is called subclinical inflammation. You can't see it, you can't necessarily feel it. There are some tests for it, but that really is, think of it like this smoldering irritant, almost like lava below the surface. It just gets kind of sitting there. Or another way you could think of it is almost like an acid, like a real low-grade acid in your body. And if your subclinical inflammation increases, what happens is, you can kind of think of it is that your body has this irritant coursing through your veins and your arteries. And it's this caustic agent, if you will. I don't want to necessarily use this acidic, because when you get into alkaline and acidity in the body, that's a whole nother definition. But for this metaphor, you can think of it similarly to almost like this acid in your body. And wherever it goes in your body, whatever your genetic weak link is, that's what inflammation will ultimately turn on in your body. So for instance, because I have a propensity for Alzheimer's in my family and neurodegenerative diseases, if my baseline subclinical inflammation level is elevated, I'm at risk for developing things like Alzheimer's, prostate cancer, and heart disease. For Robbie, and without knowing, his full background, it might be more like it might be cancer, or it might be something else. So here, this is what I want you guys to remember from kind of a broad picture here. Inflammation will turn on whatever your genetic predisposition is. A lot of people will say, oh, it's genetic. I have diabetes because it's genetic. I have Alzheimer's because it's genetic. And they kind of throw their hands up in the air with this proverbial, what am I going to do about it? It's genetic. And not realizing that if you get your inflammation level down, you can oftentimes slow down, stop, and even reverse some of the most chronic acute conditions. I've seen people that were bedridden with conditions such as Parkinson's get back to walking again. I've had patients that could hardly walk get back to dancing again. I'm not saying this is all patients all the time by any stretch, but the things that I've seen when my patients and the clients that I've worked with over the years take this seriously, the changes are absolutely astounding. It's absolutely amazing, and I'm continually amazed. Now, there's limitations to how much our bodies can heal, but the sooner you get on this, and the more complete that you make these habits part of your life, the sooner you can start seeing changes in terms of clarity of mind, reducing your risk of Alzheimer's, maintaining your brain size so you don't have shrinkage, overall reducing your inflammation so that you drastically reduce your risk of future chronic diseases. So I want to lay that foundation there, because it's absolutely critical, these things we're going to be sharing, because it's not just for your brain health. These things that we're going to be talking about are going to be overall healthy for you overall. So I really want to impress upon you, it's not just this one thing for your brain and this one thing for your skin and this one thing for your heart. It's all of these things are likely going to be good for everything. Why? Because we're going after inflammation. So it's looking at the things that cause inflammation. And a lot of people may think, well, I feel pretty good, but we know how you feel is one of the worst ways to assess overall health. I mean, how many of you ever heard someone say, oh gosh, well, so-and-so just had a heart attack and they felt great the week before? Or gosh, how did so-and-so get, all of a sudden get diagnosed with cancer? They looked so healthy. So how we look and how we feel is oftentimes irrelevant to the true core underlying health. I mean, think about this. We don't necessarily feel the Alzheimer tau plaques or fibrils or the beta amyloids, or like with Parkinson's, we don't feel the alpha-synuclein plaques building in our brains. We don't feel plaque in our arteries starting to set in. We don't feel cancer growing until we find a lump. Oftentimes these things, we're using our sensory, our normal senses to evaluate things that we don't have, our senses don't take place on. For instance, think about when you eat food. You eat food, you can feel it in your mouth, but as soon as you swallow it, you don't feel the food anymore. You don't have the same level of receptors inside your stomach, inside on your inside. The problem is with things like our brains, we start saying things like, man, I just don't feel like as sharp as I was, or gosh, I just feel a little bit brain foggy, or I just feel kind of like I'm in this cloud or like this haze, or I feel like I kind of have, like that feeling when you just take a nap and then you wake up and you kind of feel a little medicine heady, where you like just kind of feel out of it when you take an afternoon nap and you kind of took it too long. It's these kind of things that we kind of pick up on of thinking, oh, something doesn't seem right. But before our symptoms are going to get to there, a lot of damage had to take place to ultimately get to that point. So you can kind of think about it that, and this is an example you can kind of use. Some people, when they wake up from a nap or first thing in the morning, it takes a while for you to orientate yourself with the world. It takes a while for your brain, for the pistons in the engine to start firing, so to speak, when you come out of a nap or so forth, because things aren't fully connected. You're waking up, if someone startles you in the middle of the night, you're disoriented, what's going on, and so forth. People with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, etc., it's like they're living in that their entire life. And what happens is that when we're really young, well, let me back up. When we start to develop things like dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other neurodegenerative diseases, what happens is this inflammation, this component, has started to rot away the connections in our nerves. And we start to regress back to being a child and ultimately a baby. And think about how you talk to really old people, or how you talk to grandparents or people with dementia. We oftentimes talk to them like they're little kids. Oh, hey, grandma, how are you doing today? Oh, hey, grandpa, look, good to see you. We often talk to them with the same level of engagement, trying to get their attention that we would talk to with little kids. So what happens is inflammation comes in and it essentially starts to rot the connections between the nerves. And we start to regress and we start to turn back into little kids. Because when you're a little kid, you have nerves, but they haven't fully connected to other nerves. And that's why little kids don't have good dexterity. They don't know language yet. They don't have complete thoughts. The way that they think is sparse and it's scattered, and until those formations start to happen. So what happens is inflammation starts to rot away those connections and we regress. So that's why we want to do as much as we can to, number one, stop inflammation as much as we can, slow it down, and ultimately reverse it as best we can. And we'll get into as many of those as you want to, but the idea is to look at what are the things that are causing inflammation, and then what can you do to reduce inflammation. So I want to pause there because I know I was throwing a lot at you. Robbie, do you have anything that you want to add? Otherwise, I'll keep going, but I don't want to totally commandeer the entire conversation if I'm getting too far off here.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I already know that's where you're going next, but like, what are the things that cause inflammation? What are the things that we can to decrease inflammation? I know one of the huge things, and one of the, the depth of physiology research I've done is basically shown that, just like you're just talking, we all have these sleeping diseases. They're like sleeping diseases. And one of the things that creates sensitivity for those diseases is, of course, inflammation, but lack of being physically active enough. That's like the thing that sensitizes it. And then the other things in the environment really trigger that to happen. So yeah.
Perfect. So let's talk about sleep a little bit. So sleep is a big one. And this wasn't even really discovered until a couple of years ago. And I believe even the Mayo Clinic is now really on board with this, or maybe it was Harvard. I apologize, but it's talking about the glymphatic system. How many of you guys have ever heard about the glymphatic system? Not the lymphatic system, but the glymphatic system. Maybe just put a thing in the chat there if you've heard of that, or if you haven't. If you haven't, that's fine, because it's relatively new in our really understanding. Christine is absolutely right. Brain cleaning. So let's talk about this. In your brain, you have these specific type cells that are called microglial cells. And think of them like the little worker bees and construction workers, and they're kind of the janitor, if you will, but they're also a little bit more than a janitor. And what happens is when you sleep, these microglial cells get activated and they start to clean out your brain. And what happens is they're much more active when you're sleeping than when you're awake or when you're using your brain. So if you're in deep thought or you're really stressed about something, or if you're lost in thought, these microglial cells start to turn off. If you're able to step into mindfulness, meditation, being present, getting deep, restorative, restful sleep, these microglial cells become more active and they get busy cleaning out your brain. Now, we know that for instance, like in your corpus callosum, which is the area of where your brain kind of connects and talks together, the microglial cells make up about 5% of your brain. However, in your substantia nigra, which is the area that's related to Parkinson's and dopamine production, they're almost 14 to 15% density. So we find that areas that lead to a propensity of such as Alzheimer's, cognition, dexterity, mobility, dyskinesia, things like that related to these neurodegenerative diseases, there's actually some evidence to suggest that there's a higher concentration of these microglial cells, to suggest that there's even a higher propensity of these guys, these little janitor cells, if you will, to really go in and debride the area and clean up the gunk from the day. Because it's even like, no matter how clean you are, your house still gets dirty. Even if you make your bed every day, even if you take your shoes off at the front door, it doesn't matter. Your house still gets dirty. Your sheets still get dirty. Your bathroom still needs to get clean, no matter how much you wipe down the sink every time after you shave. Like my partner's like, when you shave, wipe down the sink so you get all your little hair fibers off there from your beard. No matter how much I do that, it still needs to come through and get a really deep cleaning of the bathroom and everything else. Same thing with your brain. And if you aren't sleeping appropriately or you're not sleeping properly, my colleague Michael Brewis, who's the sleep doctor, he's one of the advisors for Dr. Oz, and he's absolutely just brilliant when it comes to sleep. Talks about even just having a few hours deficiency in sleep gives you a similar impairment of 2 beers. So we know that sleep, number one, will your body uses sleep as a way to repair its brain and to clear out the gunk, if you will. It gets that deep cleaning. It lowers your risk of infection. If you have less than 7 hours of sleep, you have some of the highest risk of getting an infection. And this came out of some research around flu and COVID. If you have 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you have one of the lowest risks of infection or disease. And if you have a little over 8 or around 8, then you have some of there's additional health benefits. It won't necessarily change some of your other risk factors, but there's additional health benefits. So we know that you want to be getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and obviously, ideally, deep sleep that's restorative. The other thing is that we know that that while you're sleeping and these microglial cells are active, it's hard to play catch up, in the sense that if you think, oh, well, I only got 5 hours of sleep today, I'm going to get 9 hours of sleep tomorrow or 10 hours of sleep tomorrow. It doesn't really work that way, because you kind of miss that window. Now, I'm not saying you just throw all caution to the wind and say, oh, I missed 1 day of sleep, everything's for naught, I'm going to be sick now. No, you get back on track as best you can, but you can't really do makeup. And I say that because you can't say, oh, I'm going to go for a hike in the desert and not bring any water and just drink 3 gallons before you go on a 1-week hike. It doesn't work that way. You need a little bit of water every day. Same thing with sleep. You have to be getting the right amount every day. And I share that because there's certain habits and things that we should be doing. And I try to avoid the word should, because it implies obligation, but you could be doing every day, but I really think you really should be doing every single day, because it's part of a normal maintenance. Same thing, like you can't exercise for 12 hours in 1 day and then take the next 12 days off. You can't sleep 24 hours in 1 day and then take the next week off of sleep. So there's certain things that we need to make part of our daily habits that fall into here. And sleep is absolutely one of them. So if you're taking notes, I would say ideally you want at least 8 hours, 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep every single day. Number one. Number two, we know that being social is absolutely critical. I did a whole paper on why we don't offer the flu. This was before COVID, but that's a whole other discussion, but why we don't offer the flu vaccine in our clinics. And what we found in some of the research was that just by being social, so for instance, if you have 6 or more, so if you're taking notes, write this down, 6 or more genuine connections and interactions every 2 weeks, you have a 420% less chance of getting the common cold. If you have 1 to 3 connections over a 2-week period, you have some of the highest risk of developing the flu or getting the common cold. And what does that mean? It means 6 different connections, ideally with different people, but it has to be deep and meaningful. Meaning it's not just, going to the gas station or going to the checkout store at the grocery store, and texting doesn't count. So these could be things such as in person, could be going to church, could be work, could be a family dinner, breakfast, lunch. Could be phone conversations do work, but ideally in person, because obviously physical touch is absolutely critical as well. So I would say if you want to make part of your habits, again, we're looking at 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep to debride your brain, to flush it out. You want at least 6 different genuine interactions every 2 weeks, or more is going to be better, but genuine interactions. So obviously that's like 1 really good interaction every day or every other day. And that's why it's important to set things such as friend dates, or a date with your spouse or your partner, or hanging out with friends, or having a group or organization. We know that when people retire, if they don't maintain some level of engagement with either their church or affiliated with something or some kind of volunteerism, life expectancy plummets drastically. And we also know that it's not uncommon that if 2 people have been married for a long time and 1 person passes away, it's not uncommon that the spouse will often pass away shortly after. I know that that's happened with multiple of my patients, and the research is pretty clear on that. So those are going to be 2 things that you can do. We're going to add more to this here, but one thing I want to say about sleep is going to exercise. I really do believe that it's absolutely critical to get great exercise every single day. There's so many health benefits to that, but it also helps you get deeper sleep. Because if you're more fatigued at the end of the day, then you're going to have a deeper, more restorative sleep. So absolutely getting exercise every day is going to be great. And here's the thing. We know when it comes to the brain and the body, this is one of the lines that Arnold Schwarzenegger used. He said that when he would go work out, he didn't do the same workout every single day. Like if he wanted to work on his biceps, he wouldn't just do bicep curls every single day. He wouldn't do the same reps, the same weight or frequency. What he found he said he wanted to kind of confuse the muscle. And the same thing we want to do with exercise and with brain. I don't say confuse the muscle, like go out and hurt yourself. I kind of remembered, there's this window when I was still more in direct clinical practice. Now I'm more research based. I work with probably 5 to 10 patients a year on higher end concierge coaching. But what I typically found is that January we'd have this boost of people that were all doing CrossFit coming in, and we get a boost of all these people that were doing all these workouts. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have good core, and had all these extremity injuries. So you want to make sure that you're working within your realm here. It looks like someone just said, if your closest friend lives 5 hours or more away from you, or your loved ones are overseas, that's where I would really suggest doing Zoom calls or phone calls, or FaceTime, things like that. The closer you can get to a genuine human interaction, the better. And we know that the further away you are from human to human connection, the more that communication degrades, right? Because in-person communication is the best. Body language, tone, emotion, energy, all that can sense. But then when you get into just over the phone, you miss out on body language, but you still have inflection and tone. And then when you get down to emails and text messages, you take all that away. And that's why it's so easy to misinterpret what someone's saying over text. We have a rule in our clinics. I said, if you ever find yourself getting frustrated or irritated or mad when someone is texting you or emailing you, you don't respond. You have to either pick up the phone and call them, or you have to schedule a time to meet them in person, because most of the time there's probably just a simple misunderstanding, and getting angry over text and email tends to only get worse as opposed to in person, where you can resolve things. And there's studies from the Milgram studies that shows that the closer that humans are together, the more compassion we have for one another. So that's why we're much more inclined to save someone that's drowning in a well, right out next to us, versus sending money overseas to people that are starving. Because the closer that we are to people, the more that we feel empowered, and the more that we lean into philanthropic endeavors. And the same thing goes with those genuine deep connections. So those would be 2 or 3 of the big ones: is regular exercise, obviously, regular sleep, deep social interactions, The other thing I would say as well, and there's a lot more, but I don't want to completely inundate you guys, would be would be supplements. There's a lot of supplements and there's a lot of foods that can either increase inflammation or reduce inflammation. So I'm going to name some of the top foods that can cause inflammation. Number one, grains, legumes, beans, lentils, and seeds and seed products. Number two, dairy and dairy derivative products. Number three, refined oils, not including things like fish oil, olive oil, avocado oil, and coconut oil. So avocado oil, olive oil, and coconut oil, and fish oil as a supplement would be the ones that I would say refined oils would be okay. Pretty much all the other ones are going to be straight poison for your brain. Things such as sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, obviously anything that's hydrogenated or that has trans fats is absolutely poison for your brain. And you have to be careful because the FDA says, if you look on the back of a label and it says hydrogenated, but then on the front of the label it says fat-free, the FDA allows, I believe if it's under 0.5 grams, they can label something as being fat-free or not containing that substance. So if you look at the back of a label and it says hydrogenated or trans fats, we know that that is one of the most poisonous fats you can have in your brains. And normally humans in a natural setting, humans would only get maybe 0.5 to 1 gram a year. And you could get that much in one serving and not even realize it. And the label could say zero trans fat on the front of the packaging. It could say zero trans fat, but on the back you could see hydrogenated or trans fat as an ingredient. So you have to be really careful of that. But ideally, you want to be staying away from packaged foods. The foods that you want to be getting that are going to be very, very anti-inflammatory for your brain are going to be things such as a wide variety of colorful vegetables and fruits, ideally berries, but all kinds of fruits can be very anti-inflammatory. I highly recommend getting organic when you can, washing the skins and eating the skins as much as you can. I was at this conference at the hospital one time, and this gal who she was a PhD, and she was giving a lecture on Parkinson's because I was going there to do some additional research, and she talked about what happened was it's not just spraying pesticides, but it's also, she was talking about this study where they showed that fertilizer added to, or pesticides and herbicides added around these apple trees got into the ground and they were absorbed, and they were the magnitude, I believe, of hundreds to 1,000 times more concentrated inside the fruit than if they had just sprayed the outside of the fruit. So that's why it's important to get critical critical, I believe, to get organic, because it's not just, oh, well, I washed it. It's what they're using around the farm and in the soil that gets absorbed in the roots, and then it gets concentrated. It gets concentrated within the fruit itself, because you have this bioaccumulation effect that's going on. So to go back, I would say the things that are anti-inflammatory, you want to be getting a wide variety of colorful vegetables and fruits. And I would challenge you to do this. When you go to the grocery store, try to find a fruit or vegetable that you've never eaten before. Because a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, it's boring, there's nothing to eat. It's like, go to the grocery store. I'm willing to bet that you can find something number one, you've never eaten before, or that you haven't eaten in the last 6 months. Grab that and try something new every time you go there, because variety is very critical. There's a study that came out that showed that Americans, forgive me because I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right, but the concept remains. It was something to the effect of Americans get about 80% of their calories from 12 food sources. And when you look at things such as some of the blue zones or the Okinawans or some places in Japan, they're getting 80% of their calories from over 100 different food sources. Because the average person is getting the majority of their calories from grains or grain products. They're getting them from typically 3 meat sources: beef, chicken, and pork. And they're really just varying those things. So the meats that I would recommend, in addition to fruits and vegetables, the meats I'd recommend would be lean, healthy, grass-fed, or ideally wild game food that you really either know the farmer, or how it was raised, or you know that it came from a healthy place. And ideally, you want to cook it as little as you feel comfortable doing it. Fish might be a little bit different, but cooking it as least amount as you can, because the grass-fed, grass-finished, or wild game is going to have the highest concentration of omega-3s. Ideally, we want to be about a 4-to-1 or a 1-to-1 omega-3 to omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. The average American is anywhere from 10 to 20 to 1, meaning we're very, very more pro-inflammatory. For those of you that aren't aware, we know that omega-6s are very pro-inflammatory, omega-3s are very anti-inflammatory, and we get about 10 to 20 times more omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory in the average Western diet, than we do omega-3s. So we want to make sure that we reduce that. And here's the thing that we found recently. Have you guys ever heard of the vagus nerve? Heard Kathleen said, is butter bad if grass-fed or European style? So butter could be okay. I would prefer, almost, if you are going to do butter, I'd be preferring more like ghee, or if you are going to do it, that you're doing it on a limited basis. I guess my question would be, if you are using butter, Kathleen, what are you using the butter with? Fail skin, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. Mediterranean diet includes grains, beans, legumes, and lentils. It does. You're right. It does. Several things. One is, going back to that, for the grains, beans, and legumes and lentils, is that we know that that typically in the typical Mediterranean type diet, it's a condiment sized portion, not the main portion that we are doing here. And there's some evidence to suggest that, yes, even though it's in there, the grains, beans, and legumes and lentils, they are still inflammatory. Lentils and legumes can contain saponins, which will actually disrupt the gut, your microvilli and your gut barrier. That can lead to things such as leaky gut and so forth. We know that grains and beans have obviously gluten and other anti-nutrients in them that can be detrimental to your health on a subclinical level. And that's the thing, is that it's kind of like this, you guys. Think about it, is we all agree now that smoking is bad, right? There was a time where actually there was doctors that would promote smoking. There's, if you look, it doesn't take very long, but if you go online, you can find pictures of doctors that are smoking different cigarettes. And it's like, oh, more doctors smoke Camels than any other brand. There was a time where doctors actually recommended cigarettes to women during pregnancy. Do you guys know why they recommended cigarettes to women during pregnancy? If anyone knows, throw it in the chat there. I'd be curious if you guys know this. They recommended cigarettes to women during pregnancy because smoking would deprive the body of oxygen, and it would deprive the fetus of oxygen. It would essentially starve the baby of oxygen, stunt its growth, and women would give birth to smaller babies. So their idea was that if we basically starve the baby and prevent it from developing in the womb, we'll have easier deliveries. So you got to think that there was a time where that was considered common knowledge, and that was okay. And here's the thing. If you said something other than that, you were the crazy one. You were the crazy one. We have to remember, not too many decades ago, in most of our lifetimes, not too many years ago, ice pick lobotomies received the Nobel Prize. So you have to think about this, you guys, that there's so many things going on that we thought were true that just aren't the case. So okay, so where were we? So talk about the vagus nerve. Here's the thing. When we look at things like beans, legumes, lentils, garbanzo beans, green beans, black beans, any bean, seed, or cereal type grain is going to contain things called anti-nutrients. And that's going to affect us on a subclinical level. Just like one cigarette isn't going to kill you, today, thankfully, we all agree that smoking is not good for us. Is one cigarette going to kill you? No. But is a cigarette good for you? No. And if you smoke a cigarette every day for the rest of your life, that's certainly going to increase your risk of other health issues. Same thing with beans, legumes, and grains. It's going to increase your subclinical level of inflammation slowly over time. And what we find is things that here's the thing, you guys, watch this. Look at this. The vagus nerve is a nerve. It's a master nerve in the body, connects the brain to virtually every organ you can think of. And it's a highway of information, both receiving and sending. So we have afferent and efferent connections. That's the medical term for sending and receiving. So we have afferent and efferent signals going in the vagus nerve. But here's the thing that we found. Researchers found there's a protein in Parkinson's disease. There's a protein called alpha-synuclein that gets overexpressed and essentially gums up your brain and the whole situation, and it destroys destroys your dopamine centers because the microvilli from the lymphatic system can't keep up and they can't clean and debride the area. What we found is with that is that if you eat the wrong foods or if you do the wrong things, alpha-synuclein gets upregulated in your gut. Watch this. It gets upregulated in your gut, and it can jump into your vagus nerve, and it uses your vagus nerve kind of like a prion in mad cow disease. And it uses that vagus nerve as a highway to go up and get deposited in your brain. So when we look at this, we have to keep in mind that the gut-brain connection is much more powerful than what we realized. So what you eat and what you don't eat, your stress level, your sleep, the supplements that you're taking or not taking, your level of social interaction, your level of exercise, all of these things on a daily basis, whether you're doing them appropriately, whether you're doing them too much or too little or just right, will affect your body's ability to maintain that barrier and prevent that and other anti-nutrients from going through and getting into the blood system. You guys have probably heard of leaky gut syndrome. You guys have probably heard of celiac. So now you're hearing of alpha-synuclein and the vagus nerve hijack system, where you can have these chemicals. Here's the thing. If you eat these foods, if you eat the wrong foods, that can open up your gut and things can get in that aren't supposed to get in. If you don't have enough sleep, then your gut can't repair. If you have too much stress, then you're not digesting properly. You know, when you get stressed, you're like, God, my stomach is in knots because your body isn't properly working right. So all of these things are going to affect your body's ability to maintain a healthy gut barrier. And if it gets disrupted, it's going to determine whether your body can heal that gut barrier. And then that will determine whether those doors get open or not. And you have all this gunk or these brain plaques essentially come up and get into the brain and start depositing and start eroding those neuronal connections and causing us and you to regress back to being a little kid again. Because those chemicals get inflammatory, or they're inflammatory, they get into our brain, they cause inflammation, they cause degradation, and those synapses in our brain start to fall apart and collapse. And that's when we start to turn. That's why we talk to grandma like we talk to a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old. So things such as, we also know that stress is a big part of it. That's why I'm a big fan of meditation, mindfulness, being thoughtful of our thinking, being aware of our awareness, and not being lost in thought. There's a great line by Sam Harris. He said, if you're suffering, it's because you're lost in thought. And we know that stress is a huge risk for neurodegenerative diseases. There was, if you have a life stress, for instance, if you have a chronic life stress that lasts more than a month, you have a 200% chance, higher risk of developing a common cold. If you have a stress that lasts more than 6 months, it goes almost 300%. Now, what is a major stress? It could be a stress that includes money, possessions, a partner or a marital or a spouse stress, legal stress. Let's say maybe you're having reproductive challenges, bereavement, you're having problems with housing or shelter. So think of like major life stresses. If you have that more than a month, your risk goes up of health issues, and you can't recover and you can't repair. And this chronic stress, what it does is it starts to build new pathways in your brain that make you really good at being stressed. Let me say that again. If you don't deal with stress appropriately, your brain gets really good at living in stress. Because you think about it like this. If you wanted to be Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, or pick your elite athlete that's really good, if you wanted to be like them, what would you do? If you wanted to be like Michael Jordan, one of the world's best basketball players ever to live, you would go out and you would shoot baskets a lot. Why? Because you want to get that repetition and you want to get that so fine-tuned that it's natural. You get to that unconscious competence. Now, what happens every time you shoot that basket? When you see little kids shoot a basket, they're all over the place. And then by the time they get to being 10 or 15, they start to get more form. And then by the time they're in college, they're really reformed. And then by the time they get to the NBA, they're elite and it looks perfect. Same kind of thing. Every time that you do an activity, an exercise, a thought, stress, it gets reinforced in your brain and those connections get stronger. So if you live in stress, your brain connections will get stronger and it'll get better at being in stress. And when I say being better at stress, I mean that in a negative way. Your body actually starts to get used to that being okay. And that's how you get things like codependence or people that have a connection to abusive relationships. Maybe you've heard that person say, gosh, that person is so mean to them. They say such horrible things, or they're physically abusive or emotionally or mentally abusive. Why does that person stay with them? Well, it's because that's what they're used to, and their brain doesn't know things differently. Because here's the thing. Our brain likes a certain level of consistency. Why? Because it takes a fair amount of metabolic energy for our brain to switch gears. That's why we have systems. That's why we like habits. And that's why people, for the most part, don't like change. But once there is change and once our body's used to it, then we're fine. Why? Because change causes anxiety. There's a study that was done that showed that if you give people a tone in their brain, like give them a headset and you play the same tone over and over, when it first starts, you can measure their skin response. You can measure a little bit of a galvanic skin response in their body, meaning there's a little bit of a stress response. But if you do the same tone over and over and over again, the same consistency, the same frequency, the same volume, and the same tone, meaning like, let's just say you did like a middle C on the piano and you did it over and over and over again, eventually that stress response goes away. But if you change either the tone, like let's say you go from a C to a C sharp, or instead of like every second, you go to like every half a second, or you change the volume up or down a little bit, your body now changes, and that causes a mild stress response because your body is geared towards being attracted to new things. That's why headlines in newspapers and the news are, I shouldn't say newspapers anymore because it's so outdated, but the news headings are so sensationalized. Why? Because our brains are oriented towards new things that are threats. And so what happens is the more that we can become aware of our awareness and thinking about our thinking, and that's why I'm such a big fan of mindfulness and meditation, because it allows you to step back and observe your thoughts. We can start to get control over when there's change or when there's direction or when there's stress. We can take a step back and we can look at our thoughts just as they are. It's a thought. And now I can think, how do I want to deal with this thought? Do I want to allow this thought to cause me stress and anxiety, which is going to raise our inflammation level? Or do I want this thought to look at it simply as a thought? I remember one time I came home and I had I was living in Puerto Rico in the city, and I had a little moped that I had to get around the city. It was great because traffic was so much. And I had some visiting family. We came back from dinner and I had just parked my moped outside of the gated apartment complex where the condo was. And because I didn't have a gate clicker at the time. And I drove up and I saw right away, right where I parked my moped, it was gone. And I knew right away it was stolen. And I pulled up and I had my family with me and I said, oh, looks like the moped got stolen. And I said, well, that's a bummer. I said, well, okay, well, where do we want to go to dinner? They said, what? How come you're not upset? I'm like, well, there's a very low chance that I'm going to be able to deal with anything with it. I'm just going to go through the normal steps. I'm going to notify the police. I'm going to look at the security cameras, and if we find anything, great. If not, oh well. But I said, think about this. There's going to be a time where the fact that my moped got stolen doesn't bother me anymore. So why not just collapse time? And instead of that being a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, why not just have that be right now? And so I made the decision to just not let that bother me. And we were able to go and have the rest of the night. It was a wonderful evening. It was a wonderful dinner. And we had a great time. So I didn't allow that to come in and for that to overwhelm me or for that to stress me out. Why? Because I consider that to be a luxury problem. Nobody was immediately going to be harmed. There wasn't going to be any long-lasting effects to myself or loved ones, and there wasn't going to be anything irreversible done. So for me, I could categorize it and go through a real quick algorithm saying, okay, it happened. Same thing when we get a flat tire. It really is looking at it and thinking, because we all can probably agree that there's going to be a time where we probably, all of us, before we die, all of us are probably going to get another flat tire. So we already know that that's going to happen. And we also know that it's likely going to be at a very inopportune time. And so we also know that there's going to be a time after that flat tire where that doesn't bother us anymore. So why not make the decision right now to not let that emotionally bother us? And we just save ourselves all that mental anguish and suffering. And to me, that's the power of mindfulness, living an examined life, meditation, etc., and being and thinking about our thinking, is because if we don't, then we can be at the traffic light, we can be in the shower, we can be going about our day, and we don't realize the reel that's running in our mind of these constant thoughts that can be either causing us anxiety and stress and inflammation, or it can be calming us down and putting us in a place of relaxation and rest and repair. So I share that as a powerful approach, because our brains themselves can be a generator or a reducer of inflammation as well. So let me jump over here in the chat thread. Do you guys like this stuff? Is this stuff good or helpful? If so, just give me a thumbs up if you're liking this stuff or not.
Awesome, Thaddeus. Yeah, really, really, really awesome. So let's transition to Q&A and create.
Let's do it.
So our first access to connect with Thaddeus here is if you're a VIP, you get first dibs on connecting with our expert here. And so raise your digital hand. You guys all know how to do that. Go to reactions, click raise hand if you'd like to connect with Thaddeus or you'd like to speak with him or myself. And so in summation, let's create some summation, right?
Yep.
So the lymphatic system is absolutely crucial. One of the most important things about that, to clean out the brain and debride it, is really sleep. In sleep, you want to get very close to 8 hours, which is quite interesting because that's why, like in our physical fitness scorecard system, we have that as a high score. And then the other thing is 6 or more. That was really cool that you have specifics on this. You actually put a metric on it, which is 6 or more genuine interactions and different interactions per 2-week time period. Correct?
Yep.
And then the other big thing, which you and I are in 100% alignment on, this is why our nutrition system, yeah, there's more to nutrition than this, but I talk about 4 servings of ideally organic fruit, the size of the individual's fist per day, at least 4 servings of vegetables, at least protein, 1 gram per pound of lean body mass, and then staying well hydrated enough, right? Talking about cleaning out the body, well hydrated enough that your urine stays light yellow towards clear. That's the best word. Phoenix, Arizona, where it's 8% humidity and 110 degrees today, right? So like, should I be drinking the same amount of water as if I lived somewhere else where it's super humid and maybe the temperature is much less? No. So look at your urine. That's the best way, and that's where you should start. And you and I are so on the same page with that. Once you have that, then you can look at the other things. But everyone always wants to look at what's the next supplement? What's the next? What's this? Like, no, just get that down pat. Once you got
100%.
Then go next level.
I think what you just said, Robbie, is absolutely critical, is that because supplements are to supplement a healthy lifestyle. And as soon as people start looking at a single supplement for the end all cure all, they're looking at it through the same lens as a medication. And we're completely missing the boat because it doesn't work like that. So yeah, I'm happy to go through the supplements I'd suggest as well. And I'm happy to give a quick breakdown of like what my day looks like as well. But we can go over into the QA. I'm happy to take it kind of however we want. And one of the things I will say is that there's a lot of overlap with these things, right? Because in order to get a good night's sleep, you also have to be, to get a good night's sleep, getting a good exercise in during the day is going to help you get a good night's sleep. Dealing with your mental stress, whether it be financial, housing, relationships, whatever, and dealing with it appropriately during the day is going to help you sleep well. So all of these things are intermingled, and that's why we have to get it from the holistic perspective. We have people say, well, Thaddeus, Dr. Gala, what do I focus on first? It's your health. Oh yeah, but what do I need to work on first? My sleep or my physical fitness? All of it. It's all important.
It's
It's kind of
whatever's out of balance. That's
yeah, it's
also
like
whatever's out of balance, right? Because some
yeah.
individuals, they might be exercising every day, but their diet's really bad, or they get horrible sleep,
And here's the thing, if you have a crap diet or you're not sleeping well, exercise is one of the highest generators of free radical damage and inflammation. So if you're, I mean, you look at it, the most heart attacks occur when people are exercising. Now, I'm not making the case that you shouldn't exercise, but what I'm saying is that it's kind of like this. If you have a race car and you're putting crappy fuel, or you're putting water in the fuel in the tank, and then you go floor it, it's almost going to accelerate the damage on it. So you have to be making sure you're eating healthy, getting good sleep so that you exercise better. You have to be getting good exercise and good nutrition so you sleep better. They're all interwoven. So, it's kind of like, which tire on your car is the most important tire? Or which tire in your car could you remove and have your tire drive just fine? Like, they're all important. Same thing with your health. All right, we got a question there. Is that Chris? I think Chris, you might still be muted there. I don't know if Robbie or Patricia has. There it is. Go ahead.
All right, there we go. So I am vegan. And so legumes and beans and seeds have been, an important part of my diet. And it's like, as Robbie was talking about the protein piece, and even though I can get protein through a lot of vegetables too, I just, wonder what your thoughts are with somebody who's vegan and wanting to, maybe not consume those elements as much.
Yeah, great question.
They do help with satiation too.
Sure. Are you, so two questions. Number one, first question is, are you vegan due to health reasons or personal / religious reasons?
Ethics.
Okay. So for more personal reasons. So, right. So I can completely respect that. So the other thing, so if it's that question, then it's hard for me to really answer that, because my answer would be the same, would be to eat the animal protein, because I don't have the stat exactly, but there's some research that I've read, and this can certainly be different, especially if you're getting it from like a local farmer or something. But if you're going to, for instance, if you're going to a large, like Costco, or you're going to like a large, anything to where you're getting your produce or your vegetables from a main supplier, like from a proper farm, even if it's organic, that there oftentimes is a significant amount of animal death that still takes place in the plowing of the fields, the tilling of the fields, rodent control, things like that. So, and we can go as deep as we want to here. I don't mean to go down that path, but kind of the question that I've kind of grappled with is, how cute or lovable, or what level in the hierarchy of animals do we say is life valuable, versus, if I look at it, if here's one animal, let's say a cow or a bison or a deer, and I can take one animal and that can sustain and be healthy for my family for let's say 6 months or a year, versus the 30 digger squirrels that the farmer had to shoot or poison or gas to grow the same amount of protein, because he had to go through and protect it, and he also had to till and to create the beans and the crops and so forth. Because I know, like on our ranch, if we were on our ranch, if I just have pasture, I just add water to it, and I can let all of the animals, the coyotes, the foxes, the digger squirrels, the rodents, the moles, all those things, and the field mice, the owls, I can let all those animals live, and all I'm doing is taking one animal life every 6 months, so 2 animals a year. Versus if I were to go and produce massive crops with that, if I were to turn that into a wheat field or other things, I would be tilling all of those animal homes under, and I'd be using some type of pest control to keep out the birds, the digger squirrels, the rats, the mice, the rodents, etc., and taking many more lives. So if you have any immediate thoughts, I don't want to, shut that down, but I don't know how much Robbie wants to go in that conversation, but if it's health-wise, I really do stand by animals. If it's personal, I think that's a conversation that, I don't know, might be worth having, or going down.
Right. So with your comment, what I would say to that is that it's like the majority of the planting areas have already been set. So all of those, things that you just mentioned have already been taken care of. For me personally, eating animals is just physically nauseating and repulsive.
Yeah.
to
So
me,
then I would look at maybe other types of healthy proteins that you could get. I mean, I would try to get proteins that it's just really hard to get proteins that don't have other anti-nutrients in them, I've found,
well,
unfortunately.
actually,
I
there's
really wish I had a
tons,
better answer for you.
yeah, so there's tons of protein in vegetables. I mean, really getting the amount of protein isn't the thing. It's
Well,
that
you
I
mean,
like the legumes and all of that for satiation. And so, and I
when you
think
say,
that at one point that you had started saying that it's like maybe eat a lesser amount versus having, it's like, the quinoa be like such a major part of the dish.
well, there's very few vegetables, and just to classify vegetables versus beans and legumes and lentils and cereal grains as the WHO classifies them. So when we look at that, we have to consider that there's very few vegetables that have protein. Most proteins are going to come from seeds or the reproductive portion of the plant. So like a wheat stalk will grow. If you eat wheat, there's not much protein, but the wheat kernel will have the protein. And within that seed, there's a lot of anti-nutrients.
And Chris, it is really, really common. I don't know where this comes from, but it's super common for vegetarians to share exactly what you said. And I don't want to like berate like the vegetarian. My best friend who I grew up with, he's my best friend since childhood. And we're still friends even at this age, really close. He's a total vegan. And so so even in my personal life, I totally respect that. And I get that. I have, 2 dogs and I love animals. And so I just want to honor you for the choices that you've made for your food choices and where you're coming from with that. Cause I think really, part of this and part of what we were just talking about with brain health is really the emotional connection. And part of what we do in our VIP family and stuff. And the way I teach our team is like love and care and connect. And so I just want to make sure that like you feel supported in your health here and that you're connected with. And I really honor you for the decisions that you're making, why and what's behind it. But in terms of vegetable and protein, yeah, like Dr. Gala shared, it's, vegetables have very little protein. They're super healthy. They give us amazing life sustaining, thriving, not just thriving property. But they have very little protein. And that's one of the really difficult things as a vegan. It's not easy to get a high protein. And every time you go to get a protein source, you get a bunch of carbs and fats and also anti-nutrients with it. And one of the best proteins, I'm sure you probably already know this, being a vegan, is pea protein. So one of the best is pea protein, has a really good amino acid profile, and it's very close to -1 amino acid. It's very close to whey protein, actually. So pea protein would be a good thing for you to do if you're not already doing that.
So in thinking about the brain inflammation, though, is that with the legumes and beans and all of that, it's like, are you saying that should not be in the diet at all, or is there like an amount that research has found that it's like, oh, it's like 3 tablespoons is good, or doesn't cause brain inflammation? Or
So I would kind of, so let me just echo, I would echo a lot of what Robbie says, is that it is tough. And I do respect where you're coming from in terms of your intentions of, I think life is sacred and we should work to protect life. Absolutely. So I do respect that. And that's where the waters kind of get muddy or muddled a little bit at times, trying to figure that out, right? Because that's like the even conversation about solar panels. Well, does it take more pollution to even make the solar panels than we get from it? It's like, so we have to look at all the facets of it. So I get it. What I would suggest is this, that and look, I wish things were different. Like I really wish that cake and ice cream were really healthy for me. Like that'd be great, because I love those things. But my health is number one. And then I work through everything else secondarily on that. So I look at it and say, could you have a few grains or beans and legumes and that be okay? Probably. I mean, it's kind of like, could you smoke a couple cigarettes and be okay? Probably. It all just depends on where you want to be. And I would say, number one, if you're happy with your health and you're happy with where you're at with your mental cognition, your lab work, your weight, your energy level, and if you're happy with where you are and where you're going, then great, then keep doing what you're doing. If you're not happy with any one or more of those things, and you want to see a change, then all change starts with telling ourselves the truth. And to me, that was part of it for me as well. Is I said, okay, I want to be healthy. So what do I need to do? Okay, I need to be really honest that I'm not getting as much sleep as I know that I should. And if that's really important, then I need to talk to these people in my life and tell them, look, I know you want to go to this party, but I want to be home by this time. And I'm sorry. And I'm going to miss out on a social interaction. So I'd love to hang out with you, but it needs to be during these times. So we have to set up those boundaries that work in our lives so that we can hit our goals, because it's just all a trade-off. Just depends on how much you want to do.
And on that, on sleep, it's like my body seems to just 6 hours.
Yeah.
When I wake up. And then also had a question, what do you think about naps?
So I'm curious.
I'm not a nap person, but.
So I'm curious what your daytime pattern looks like when you get up. So if maybe just go through a series of questions. So when you get up in the morning, do you go out in the sun?
Now that I have a product that I'm watering, yes. In the winter, no.
Okay. So, okay. And then how much do you exercise?
That I'm not so good about. I'm getting about 3 days a week, about 40 minutes.
So, I mean, we can kind of stop there and kind of go back to a point that Thaddeus shared earlier. He didn't exactly say but basically the stronger your sleep cycle, your wake cycle is, the better your sleep cycle is going to be, to a degree, right? Then we go so far, the people who overtrain and they start creating inflammation from exercise. So you want to train at the right intensity level for the right duration and volume. But if you increase your physical activity and you go outside in the sun and you have exertion and you get yourself a little physically tired to match you where you're at now appropriately, not overtrained, and you do that on a daily basis. So, 4 or 5 days a week, you're doing some level of strength and aerobic type of conditioning training. And then 3, 4 other times a week, you're doing some mobility training, meditative type of sessions. That's really what I would send you to do, and make sure that it's the every day you go out in the sun early, like 7. I don't know what time you get up, but let's say you get up at 6, 7. Within an hour of waking up, you're going out in the sun, you're spending at least 10 minutes. You're letting your face be exposed. You're letting your calves be exposed. That's actually a large part in sleep in light type of research, like the back of the legs actually get sensitivity to that. So you want to have that full, and you'll feel a state change when you go out in the sun and do this. You'll feel kind of like an awakening, a state change. So you want to do all of that and exercise, and that will improve your sleep. It will improve. You'll notice it. Like, man, just doing that, you're going to get more deep sleep and longer sleep. And then it's going to come back to actually give you more energy, to where maybe the exercise that was hard at first, now the exercise gets easier. And now you're on this awesome path. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. I like that.
It's hard at first. Sometimes it's hard at first because you're like, I don't really want to exercise. I'm not used to exercise. But once you do it, then it's easier. And then another big thing too, I think, is people get deterred with exercise something because they think like, okay, especially like I love our online training system because you train from home. Like, you don't have to go put on shoes and grab a bag and go to the gym and do all this stuff. Just turn on Zoom and let's go. But think about your exercise as like the first 2 or 3 things you're going to do. You don't have to think about an hour-long session. Just think, I'm going to do 1, 2. Just think the first 2 steps. And once you start to get in motion, then it's so much easier. Like, once your body's in motion, you don't have to think about the whole hour. It becomes so easy, or a half hour, whatever you decide to start with. Yeah.
Great. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Great questions.
Yeah. And VIPs, any questions that you guys have, let me know. I'd love to bring you up and chat with us here. Let me know any questions that you have. Anything, maybe you don't even have quite, maybe you want to just chat about something.
Is it okay while you're waiting? I can answer some of those questions in the chat thread.
Yeah, let's go with that, and then we'll
Okay.
go to Laura next.
So it looks like there's a couple back here. Someone asked about prebiotics and probiotics for gut health. I'm absolutely a fan of that. I would say that, yeah, I think both are great. For probiotics, I typically suggest, maybe doing like probiotics, maybe like a month at a time, and maybe you could do that once or twice a year, especially if you're looking at doing a surgery. There was a study that came out with surgery for around the liver, and there's a study I was reading that it was the results were absolutely mind-boggling in terms of how much better people did after surgery if they were put on a probiotic regimen immediately after they finished with any antibiotics. So I think doing probiotics, working with your doctor as soon as you can after any type of surgery, either before, during, or after a surgery, is absolutely critical. And doing it once or twice a year can be good every so often. So yeah, I think that's absolutely great. Let's see here. Well, I think we kind of already talked about that. So it looks like Dr. Robert Garza.
He's a team member of ours too.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so I think that's a great idea about that. So in terms of where can you get more omega-3s from? Yeah, it's a great question. So green leafy vegetables and animals that eat green leafy vegetables. Eating green leafy vegetables or algae, you'll get a certain type of omega-3 that isn't really well converted in the body. There's of alpha linoleic acid, you have about a 2 to 20% conversion of plant-based omega-3 into the DHA EPA, which is the animal-based usable form of omega-3s. So that's another reason why I'm more a proponent of meat, of animal protein.
You're cutting out there, my friend. Not sure if it's just for me or for everybody.
Oh, can you hear me there?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So getting omega-3s from animal based proteins are going to be in the usable form of EPA DHA. So for instance, you could take 1 gram of fish oil that has, let's just say you're taking 1 gram of EPA DHA, which is the animal based omega-3 fish oil. You could take 1 gram of that versus you may need 5 to 20 grams of flaxseed oil. So you need arguably 5 to 20 grams of flaxseed oil to 1 gram of the fish oil. That's why I'm unless you like just chugging on bottles of oil every day, I'd much more suggest that you do fish oil or krill oil or things like that.
One fish oil that we really recommend is, and we don't have any connection with them, but it's a Nordic Naturals, which comes in the triglyceride form, which has been shown for eye health as well. And so is really awesome. So Nordic Naturals triglyceride form, omega-3s is really awesome.
Well, the omega-3s are critical. Not only have they been shown that they can reduce postpartum depression, because it's so critical. Women actually will sequester it in breast milk from their body for the infant because it's critical for brain development, retinal development, like you mentioned, spinal cord development, etc. So much that the female will essentially leach it out of her body at the expense of her body to make sure that the infant has enough. So supplementing with fish oil can sometimes even has been shown to reduce postpartum depression. So omega-3s are absolutely critical for reducing inflammation, brain health, all kinds of things.
A little different than what the doctors were trying to do with smoking, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
The body's actually making up for it and giving it to the baby. That's awesome.
Yeah. So someone said here they want to hear a day in the life of Dr. Gala. I can kind of run through that really quickly. Do you want to hear that or just some bullet points on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I do. So I try to wake up without an alarm whenever I can. So I try to not wake up with an alarm. So I wake up and the first thing I do is have a full glass of water. So let me back up. First thing I do is I'll go to the bathroom and if I can void, so if I can defecate as well, great. Otherwise, I'll have a glass of water and I'll defecate first thing. It's part of my routine right out of the gate. I've never had a problem with that in my entire life. So if you're not having, I always say this, if your bowel movements are taking longer than your cat or dog, then you have a digestive problem. You should be on the toilet no longer than your dog or cat it takes them to go to the bathroom. If you're straining or constipated or not having regular daily bowel movements, or what we call your body should be having what's called a mass movement, which is that urge of like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom every day and having well-formed stool, then there's you have problems with your digestion. That can be caused by medication, stress, poor sleep, poor diet, all these kind of things that cause inflammation. So first thing is wake up, have a full glass of water, go to the bathroom, and then if I'm in the habit of weighing myself, I'll weigh myself then and try to get an accurate read there. Then ideally what I'll do is I will either do 10 to 15 minutes of mindfulness and meditation, and then some gentle yoga and stretching. So even just doing some light things just to get my body moving and going throughout the day. And then what I'll do is I'll come down and I'll do about a 20 to 25 gram collagen protein shake, because for me, I'm trying to build muscle. So I'm trying to keep my protein intake up. And if I'm not trying to actively build muscle or put on mass, then I typically will fast and I won't eat anything typically until about a small lunch. And then I'll have a really big dinner. So lunch is usually medium and dinner is usually my biggest meal of the day. For instance, last night I had 4 chicken skewers. I had a big salad. I had a full big like dinner salad with a full thing of salmon on it. I had a full bowl of coleslaw, and then I had this like beef stew thing. What else did I have? And I also had a tea, and I have my supplements. So usually, like if I go out to a restaurant to eat, usually I'll order 2 dinners plus an appetizer, because that will be my biggest meal of the day. And I've weighed about 100 and 165 pounds pretty much my whole life, unless I'm really aggressive on it. So I'll wake up, have a glass of water, go to the bathroom, do some 10 minutes of mindfulness, 5 to 10 minutes of even just some light stretching yoga. I'll have my protein shake, and then I'll get right away working on some of the biggest tasks and projects of the day. Because in the morning, that's where it's the quietest. I have the most space. I have room. I have area to work on projects. And I try to get the most pressing tasks done first. Then I'll have lunch. And then in the afternoon, I will, I'm more of an afternoon worker outer, if that's the right term for it. So I like to work out in the afternoon just because that's when my energy's up a little bit more. I'm more awake, and I find that I can get better, more intense workouts in the afternoon. So usually after lunch, then I'll do some more workout, and then I'll try to go to a workout maybe like 2, 3, 4 o'clock. And I'll go to the gym for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on what I'm doing. I'm trying to put on some mass, so my exercises are focused on that. I'll also do some sprints. When I do sprints, I like to do what's called the peak 8s, which is basically high intensity sprints followed by active recovery. I'm more of a fan of high intensity, and I also am a big fan of really doing core. I bet Robbie can probably speak to this much more eloquently than I can, but for me, I came across some research years ago that showed that athletes had more extremity injuries, almost double extremity injuries, when they didn't have a good core workout. So what we found is that athletes and people in general, by having a good core workout as your foundation, you drastically reduce extremity injuries. And by extremity, that's wrist, elbows, shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, etc. So for me, it's getting my core first will actually increase strength in your extremities. So you're not inappropriately recruiting muscles, and it'll also drastically reduce injuries. So even though it's maybe not as glamorous, having a good core exercise routine is absolutely critical for that. And then I'll usually spend time with either friends or family in the evening, or I'll have dinner, and then afterwards I'll do some more research and find things that I like to read, or I'll kind of let my brain go into things like that. For supplements, I'll usually take my supplements with dinner. What I'll do is typically 3 to 4 grams of EPA DHA, that's fish oil. I'll do a probiotic, kind of that regimen I was saying. I'll do vitamin D, 5 to 10,000 IUs a day with a little bit of vitamin K. I'll do 500 to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium. I'll do about 3 to 500 milligrams of CoQ10, because CoQ10 is extremely neuroprotective. It's it's a very high antioxidant. It helps with muscle gene expression, and it helps with energy or ATP production or energy production. And it's also been shown to help reduce, mitigate, or stave off and reverse potentially Parkinson's as well. So CoQ10 is absolutely critical for the brain. We stop producing it after about age 10 to 20. And unless you're eating animal organ meat regularly, you're likely not getting it in your diet. So unless you're still a hunter-gatherer, you're probably not getting CoQ10 in your diet anymore. So that's why I supplement with CoQ10. So I said CoQ10, fish oil, magnesium. I'll do a multivitamin, and then I'll do several antioxidants or anti-inflammatory supplements. There's another one that I've been researching recently, and my view has changed on this recently, but I believe that I'm more in the camp of leaning much more towards cannabinoids, because there's research to suggest that cannabinoids can very well stimulate what's called PEA, which I'm going to butcher this, but it's palmophenylhalamide, which is a naturally occurring substance in your brain, and it can upregulate that, which can actually activate your microglial cells. And the microglial cells are those cells that go in and clean your brain. So cannabinoids actually increase the activity. It's kind of like it gets the janitors off their butt and gets them to start cleaning again. So the cannabinoids can potentially help that. So I may start taking that in supplemental form as well. I haven't researched much more than that, but I know that there's a lot of research around that. So that for brain debridement. There's a handful of other ones that I take, but it's more for building for more muscle strength and so forth. So and then I try to go to sleep. I try to shut off anything that has to do with with computers or screens, ideally an hour before bed. And then before bed, if our schedules align and everything works out, obviously making love with my partner is great, because that helps with sleep. And that's obviously great for intimacy, for connection, feels great, and everything else, all the other benefits that come from that. And then going to sleep, I try to turn the heat down. So I try to have my room cooler at night. Yeah. And I'd say that, I mean, there's obviously a lot more to it, but that's kind of the flyby. Oh, I also like to try to get outside and go to the ranch, because I own about 140 acre ranch that I'm remodeling and working on. So I try to also get out there sometime, because I just love being outside on the ranch. So I try to get outside and go find an excuse to go play there and fiddle fart around with something there as well.
And now you know every detail about Thaddeus's day.
There it is.
Awesome. Yeah.
Lord.
So you took some inspiration of some things you can apply to your day. And let's chat with Laura here. Hi, Laura.
Lord, I think you're on mute there, Laura.
Thank you for going through your day. That was interesting. So gosh, now my head is spinning. So you don't concern yourself with morning sun then, it sounds like.
So I think Robbie has a great thing there. So I will say this, part of my social interaction, which I absolutely love, is I've been an athlete my entire life, and I'm horrible at soccer. And there's a group that plays Monday and Friday morning at 6 a.m. So I'll wake up at 5 on those days, and I'll go out and play soccer with them. Why? Because I'm horrible at it. And I'm really good at a lot of things in life, and I'm horrible at soccer. So it makes me very humble, and it puts me in my place, because there's these little like 15-year-old kids that are running circles around me. But I'm a good enough athlete that I can still kind of beat them up and shove them around. So it kind of balances out, right? So I do that because working out with a partner or doing that, I'm doing several things. I'm getting good social interaction. There's a camaraderie of the group there, even though we are, we get out there and we hustle and we shove each other around, but at the end, we leave it all in the field and we're friendly. So I do get some morning sun on those mornings. I think there's a strong validity to getting morning sun. So I agree with what Robbie's saying. If you're doing it for vitamin D, the research that I've found shows that you can't make vitamin D if your shadow is shorter than you, as a general rule. So let's just use a round number. If you're 6 feet tall and you go outside and your shadow is 6 feet or longer, you're not going to make vitamin D. So typically, what that means is between the times of 10 and 3 is when you want to get about 15 to 45 minutes a day, depending on your skin color, to where you get what's called your MED, or your minimum erythromal dose. So basically just enough for your skin just turns pink. For the maximum melanocyte production, or melanin production, or melanocyte activation and melanin production, you ideally want to be getting sun every other day. So if you want to get the melanin production, which is protective of your skin, the darkening of your skin, or the proverbial tan, The best way to do that isn't actually everyday sun exposure. It's every other day. So every other 40, it's kind of like, because everything's a balance, right? Like you can drink too little water, you can drink too much water. You can work out too little, you can work out too much. So the research that I've found is essentially every day, or maybe even ideally every other day, we get sun between the hours of 10 and 3, or at least when your shadow is shorter than you, and you're getting 15 to 45 minutes or whatever your minimum erythritol dose is based on your skin tone of ideally face, arms, chest, back, and legs, full sun exposure. Ideally, I say without chemical protection. If you do want sun protection, I much prefer mechanical protection, meaning like a wide brim hat. I wear those long sun shirts, and even in the real breathable sun shirts that you see like Caribbean and the tropics. I have a handful of those like when I'm working out in the yard. So they're really breathable, but they still have sun protection, a wide brim hat. And then I'll also wear like real breathable pants. And I will then intentionally set my timer that when I'm outside, like at the ranch, I'll take my shirt off, I'll take my hat off, and I'll wear shorts, and I'll set my timer for 15 to 30 minutes.
Cool. So
I was just going to say really quick, my shadow is always shorter than me.
I like it.
See her very well, but she just got to come in from outside.
I like it.
Her name's Shadow.
Oh, yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So when you're talking about prebiotics and probiotics, I take a fulvic acid supplement and don't really do the prebiotics and probiotics. Do you have any comments on fulvic acid?
I wouldn't make any comments here because I try not to make comments unless I feel really confident in it. So I wouldn't want to say something here and kind of half-ass it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So
I like to have something to stand by a reference. So I would kind of just say no comment on that.
Okay. And why have you chosen to do your largest meal of the day at dinner time?
Yeah, a great question. So because when I get going throughout the day, so I think there's number one, and I'm not saying I base this on it entirely, but number one, I believe that there's historical precedence that a little bit of munching throughout the day, but having a main meal at evening seems to be the way that humans evolved and how we kind of came about, if you will. Obviously very opportunistic if there's something there. And because I think at the end of the day, that's when you're more kind of like coming down and you've done the work for the day. You've done your foraging, you've done your hard stuff, and your body's more letting down. And now it's kind of going into rest and digest mode. So starting your day off with a big meal, I don't think there's a big historical precedence for that. And we also know that every time you eat, you have an inflammatory response. So if you start the day off with a big breakfast and then you jump into work, well, you have to think your blood is either going to be going to your very metabolically demanding brain or nervous system tissue, or it's going to be going to digestion. So if you're, to me, several things. One is there's an inflammatory response every time you eat. So if you can minimize, let me back up, caloric restriction and reducing the frequency of eating has been shown to be a marker of longevity and reducing inflammation. So if you can, even if you eat the same calories, but you eat it in a smaller portion of time, there's less inflammation, there's less of an insulin response, there's all these other benefits to eating one time a day. And so the more times you eat, the more inflammation you have, the more calories you eat, the more inflammation that you have, and the slower and the lower the lifespan. So I choose evening and dinner because number one, that's usually when people are done and they're not hurrying off to go do something for the day. So you can combine it with social activities such as the proverbial breaking of bread, even though it's breaking of inflammation. Yeah. So so it's usually where people are together. They're not rushing off to things. So you can get social connections. You're likely going to be winding down versus winding up afterwards. So you're going into more of this restorative, repairing, rejuvenation period anyways, as you're going towards sleeping and going to bed. And then you have all night for your body to really assimilate and to use all those nutrients to repair from your exercise, your mental stress, to debride your area. It then has this abundance of nutrients and building blocks to really go through and then do its magic while you're sleeping.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm familiar with most of those concepts. I just, one of Robbie's other guest just recently sent an email that said that there was a study that showed that a narrowed feeding window didn't really do anything, which I was really surprised. So I wanted to just ask
If you have
about-
that study, I'd love to look at it, because it depends on what metric, because when we say that it doesn't do much, I'd
Well,
love to see what the metrics were.
So that we create clarity here, when we, so I bring on some of the world's best leaders. So on science and health topics. So when you get genius level, you're going to get like, for example, what Thaddeus is doing, I guarantee you, I trained bodybuilders and physique athletes for 10 years. So he's correct. Like, that is more longevity. But Thaddeus is never going to actually reach his pinnacle of his muscle gain, what he really wants, by eating the way he's eating. But
Right.
we'll get that longevity, and he'll still develop muscle. He'll still do that. It's still healthy. So it's like, well, where do you want to go, and who are you? And sometimes
100%.
like one big thing I feel is like, let's forget everything and let's just say, what can you do here? What is your behavior? What actually is going to be easiest for you to follow? Okay, now from the smorgasbord of health optimization, let's figure out what you can do. Because once you can start taking action and feeling good about those actions, and it matches your life, and you can do it forever, that's going to be the thing that thrives you. Like, if you're trying to follow with that, it just doesn't work. Like, for me personally, if I ate nothing in the morning, like, I do fasting because I think there is some benefit to it, but I'll eat like 12 or 1 or that type of sometimes. But to do it all the time, I'm going to miss out on my muscle regeneration. And when I'm 70 and 80 and 90, I want to still be holding a good amount of muscle. So one of the things that I think about is making sure that I prevent sarcopenia. So while I'm in my 40s, 50s, 60s, I have the best muscles. So there's so many different strategies behind it, right? So like, I forgot the gentleman now who wrote the book, but recently he came out with this book, and that was the thing that we were talking about with Jose Antonio, the #1 protein researcher in the world, which is mTOR. So like, mTOR is this protein signaling pathway that elevates your muscle and development. And basically, is Harvard researcher has shown, like, hey, if you're elevating your mTOR.
David Sinclair is the author.
What is it?
David Sinclair.
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah, David Sinclair. So in David Sinclair saying, hey, if you're optimizing your mTOR, then you're going to affect your longevity. And it's like, well, and they really don't have any real proof other than laboratory science type settings to say, okay, yes, but well, what about that's what Dr. Jose Antonio, who's also an elite scientist researcher, saying, well, if you can prevent sarcopenia, which is one of the #1 things for age-related decline, and then you have metabolic function. And if you don't have enough muscle and you're not physically fit into your 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond, then that is going to be an inflammatory marker. So you want to have the best physical fitness, the best function, because if you lose your stability, you lose your capability, then you're not going to be able to be fit. And then that's going to increase elevation, alter your sleep. So it's like, I don't want to create like where we're going to get lost in it, but I think you start with what are you going to naturally click with the most, right? And what works best for you? Like, yes, absolutely, it's proven. If you don't eat for a period of time, your immune system gets to recover. You're not overworking your body. There's some longevity purpose. Eating more and more often, there's some muscle gain. Maybe you don't need a muscle. Maybe your goal is really fat loss. So you should eat less. You should do fasting, eat for a period of window. When you do eat, certain things are like absolutely proven. Vegetables and fruits are both good for you. No, fruit isn't a high sugar thing that's going to cause problems unless you're eating way too much of it in one sitting. But like,
or you're diabetic or have some metabolic issues, but
yeah, but basically, and if you're eating berries, so then you just modify. So like vegetables and fruits, that's proven. Having a pretty high protein, unless you really have some type of disease situation where that doesn't work for you. And then hydration. So those are like everybody. That's why I talk about that nutrition, because it's areas where everybody should do it. It's going to optimize everybody, right? Having some sun is going to, in getting good sleep and all these things. So it's kind of like finding like what works for you to optimize. That's really the way.
Robbie, can I say one thing on that?
Go ahead. Yeah,
I agree with everything you're saying, Laura. I would say this, and for those of you guys that are listening, is I would say it comes down to asking this one question, and I ask this to every single client that comes in right out of the gate: is if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing or get rid of one thing in your life with your health, what one thing with your health would you want to get rid of or change?
My varicose veins.
So then what I would do is be looking at things, and I was saying that rhetorically, but thank you for asking, but that's great. So the thing I would say is that we start with that then, because then to me, it's okay, well, why is it important to you to get rid of your varicose veins? And what I'll do is I'll do the 7 levels of why. I'll ask my clients and patients basically 7 times. I'll ask them why 7 times.
Yeah, I know that.
And until I get down to what their really emotional reason is, because then once I define their emotional reason of why they want to make a change, then I will take the things that I know to be healthy from my kind of tool of my bag of tools, and then I'll apply that. Because just like Robbie said, like my suggestions of not eating, I'm fully aware that I'm not going to be able to get enough protein or protein assimilation to build the muscle. So for me, that's why recently, not always, but recently I started more or less forcing, or I understood that, hey, I need more protein more regularly throughout the day. So that's why I wake up and I do a protein shake versus previously I didn't. But if someone came in and said,
I tried that too recently based on hearing Robbie multiple times. And I'm curious which brand you use, because I didn't, that's processed food to me. And it doesn't make a lot of, I didn't notice a difference.
Well,
and it's also processed food. And does that also technically break your fast?
Well, and that's why it would depend on your goals. Because if you want to be a marathon runner versus a bodybuilder, they're going to be very different suggestions on nutrition and exercise. So that's why if your goal is varicose veins, and then getting rid of varicose veins, and then what's your next goal, in terms of health or longevity or fitness?
I know no way of getting rid of them other than surgery, and I'm not a fan of that. And
I believe that there's some laser type therapies you can do, and some infrared and some other things you can do. Because we used to do a certain amount of that in our clinics with neuropathy treatments and some other therapies that we do. So if you really want to get rid of that, you may want to look into some of those different therapies that are out there.
Okay, so since you asked the question, I wasn't planning to, I had no intention of talking about my varicose veins, but since you asked me that question, is there anything nutritionally that would fix that problem that was created when I gave birth to my 4th child?
So,
and I have a family predisposition, I guess.
Yeah. So I would say this, I would say, I don't know of any foods or nutrition that's going to reverse it. However, I would say that all the things that we talked about in terms of getting inflammation down, getting rid of the insulting agents in our body, and inserting healthy things in our body is going to give us the best chance of them not getting worse, stopping the progression, and or when you start integrating other therapies of having those things have a better impact. Right. So it's only gonna help what I'm getting at. Am I able to share my screen, Robbie?
Yes, but
well, looks like you might need a tweet, do something there. So, okay. Yeah, great question. I don't know if we want to dive into other questions. I'm happy to do that, or we can keep going with this. If other people,
I was also curious why you take your supplements at night, because I was told I should take them before 3 in the afternoon. I mean,
do you know why you were told that?
No, I don't remember, because it was a long time ago. That's why I'd like to know your why, so I can file that.
So I take it in the evening. The number one reason I take it in the evening, watch this, you guys. It's very scientific, because I'll remember to take them.
Okay, fair enough.
That's why I take them. Number 2, the reason I take them in the evening is because I usually am I very rarely, if ever, miss or skip dinner. I can get busy with a project or a meeting and I can skip lunch. I can get busy and run out the door, and maybe I did soccer that morning at 5 a.m. and I'm hitting the ground running with interviews. And so I missed my breakfast. But I don't know. I know very few people, if anyone, that misses dinner. And so number one, so I'm very rarely going to miss it. I can set up a system. So I have them all laid out, prepackaged, that I basically go through and I have the jars, either myself or my housekeeper goes through and they lay them all out. So I just grab it. I have a handful of about 20 to 30 supplements, and I just I eat like 2 bites of food. I take all of them at once,
Oh my gosh.
I take one gulp, I take a shot of pomegranate juice for the antioxidants. So I take
Yeah.
one shot of pomegranate juice, washes them all down, and then I eat the rest of my meal.
Okay. So I know I've taken a lot of time. So, but when you mentioned supplements, not to be taken all the time, are the ones that you're planning to take all the time?
I take them all the time, except for probiotics.
Okay. And just back to, I know sugar's inflammatory, and Robbie was, saying fruits don't count, which is fine. But is it best to stick to fruits that have a lower glycemic index, or that's not
I would
really?
suggest that, yeah. If I would suggest, unless you're, yeah, I like berries first. So berries, because you have to think the majority of the health is going to be in the skin, of the fruits and vegetables. So raspberries, blueberries, cranberries, blackberries, strawberries, all different type, goji berries, huckleberries, because you got to think of how much surface area they have per berry. Just think of like a blackberry. Think of how many different things that they have on that, on the surface area, versus like an apple, where the skin is very minimal surface area compared to, it's like kind of like a balloon, like the surface area of a balloon versus the surface area of your lungs with all the alveoli. The surface area of your lungs is that of a tennis court. Most people don't realize that because of all those little things. So think of that same thing with a blueberry versus an apple. So they're going to typically be lower in the glycemic index and load. So on this chart here, I use this a lot of times with patients. And the way I use this, go ahead.
Really quick. So on fruits, all things with moderation, right? So if you can take something really healthy and you eat like a bunch of fruits at once, then you're starting to get too much sugar. And if you don't need all those carbohydrates, then that can have some inflammatory effect. So,
really, I'm not talking extremes. Like I can tell a difference when I eat a banana.
Right.
Cranberries. Cranberries are really low in sugar, even lower than blueberries.
Yeah.
They're like the lowest berry sugar wise.
Yep.
I'm a very clean eater. I just always like to get into the brains of all these other people. I have plenty of knowledge of myself. I'm just really always curious.
Yeah.
What's driving other people's choices, and
because I also I don't recommend supplements on an empty stomach. I think taking a couple bites of food, because then it'll assimilate and you'll be absorbed and kind of mix and emulsify with everything. Because I know some people, they take some, myself included. If I take too many supplements on a completely empty stomach, I'll throw up because it's too much concentration. So if you have a problem taking supplements, take it with food. And that's why again, same reason I take it in the evening, because I remember it's with a meal, my body can assimilate it. So with this here, the way I say, look, at the bottom here, you have all these health conditions. You have pain, diabetes, arthritis, overweight, Alzheimer's, and you have all these health issues down here. And what we know is that again, that's your genetic predisposition. And if you have high inflammation here in the center, any one or more of these things can come on. So to me, I look at this as it's the canary in the mine shaft. If you have arthritis, if you're overweight, if you have high blood pressure.
Let me just say, I have poor vision. As you see, I'm wearing glasses and not getting younger. I'm aging. But other than that, I don't have anything visible on this chart.
Oh, sure. No, I'm speaking more generically. I'm more kind of like taking a step back this is for kind of all viewers. All listeners. Is that if somebody has one or more of these, or if they have a diagnosed Western condition and a lifestyle condition, and I mean not like an infection. I'm not talking like cholera or like the bubonic plague or something. That's different. But even COVID, we can get a whole conversation about COVID. But regardless, so looking at all of these things down here, if you have these things and they last more than 2 weeks. I mean, if you have pain that lasts more than 2 weeks, if you have high blood pressure that lasts more than 2 weeks, or if you're overweight for more than 2 weeks, or arthritis that lasts more than 2 weeks, then you have too much subclinical inflammation. And where does that come from? It comes from any one or more, or a combination of these things at the top being out of balance, either too little or too much or not correct. So I share that because conceptually we can have one thing such as low vitamin D. Low vitamin D can cause inflammation and can lead to cancer, heart disease, poor bone health, and a whole host of things. But you can also have heart disease can also be caused by smoking, poor diet, etc. So you can have one cause can have many effects, and one effect can come from many causes. And that's why, like I said earlier, it's like which tire on your car is more important. All of them are important. And that's why with health, we have to do all of these things. We have to do it with rigor.
Does the C-reactive protein measure subclinical inflammation or
it does. It's one of my favorite tests. I do this with almost every client, pre and post, and not just C-reactive protein, but HSCRP. HS stands for highly sensitive C-reactive protein. So you have to make sure you're getting the right test.
All right.
So HSCRP. Now here's the thing. It oftentimes will show you if you have inflammation. However, a low CRP does not necessarily mean the absence of inflammation. So it can demonstrate that there's a positive high inflammation. And for me, I would say this: if you're not less than 0.1, then you have too much inflammation. A lot of doctors will run the test and say, "Oh, you're like 1, or you're like 0.5, or you're 1.2, or you're 1.5, or 3, or whatever." If you're over 0.1, meaning, in my opinion, if your C-reactive protein is detectable, then you have high inflammation, period. Because HSCRP cannot and will not be elevated unless you have an inflammatory process going on with your white blood cells, and the interleukin 6 and a few other things that are going on in the body that upregulate that. Great question.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I was trying to help Darren too. I saw his question in the chat. But yeah, thank you. I won't take any more time. I really appreciate.
Can I share one thing here? We might get a kick out of this. It has some audio in it as well. Can you guys see my screen there? Yep. This was me trying to educate people how to take supplements, and it turned out badly. So, or maybe poorly, but it's comical, right? Because normally this doesn't happen to me, I promise. Here we go. We have 30 supplements here. So 30 supplements. I know you can't maybe see them all, but that's 30 seconds. I'm sorry, 30 supplements. We're gonna see how long it takes to take 30 supplements. Usually I can get this down at one go. That's half of them, and then that's the rest of them. That normally doesn't happen. You too should pursue health. Got him down. I don't know if you can hear me, but I say you too should pursue health. So normally it doesn't happen, but I had to laugh at myself because no, truly, like I never choke on supplements. And so that happened, and I thought I might as well share that and everyone get a kick out of it. But that's how I do it. I take 15 to 30 supplements, and it can be done with that quickly if you build up to it. So it can go pretty quickly.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thaddeus. End on a funny note. I love it.
That's it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Thaddeus Gala, for an amazing episode. I've shared a lot here. I think it was a really awesome conversation. You shared so much really cool insight, lots for all participants to think about. And wouldn't you agree, Laura? It was a great episode. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the questions. I just saw one other person there said thoughts on coffee. I'm not a fan of coffee or caffeine. I won't necessarily get into it because I know we're short on time, but that's my thoughts on it. But yeah, it's been awesome. It's been great. I really appreciate you guys. I mean, of course, if you have questions or comments, you can reach out. You can find me on social media, or Robbie can share my contact information there.
Awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. If anyone and if any VIP would like to get in touch with Thaddeus, let me know and I'll get you connected. Much love to all of you. Make it a great rest of your weekend. And for our VIPs, I will see you in training on Monday. Much love to you. See you then. Thanks.
Thank you guys. Thank you for having me.